We need to continue a frank, transparent, and result-oriented dialogue about what went wrong in our efforts to contain the virus and what we have to do to avoid a similar situation in the future. We will also need to ask and answer questions about how COVID-19 vaccines can be distributed fairly and equitably. This is not just a question of health and economics, but of ethics in most profound way. Excellencies, considering these recent developments, I have been carefully reflecting on my priorities. Confronting the effects of the coronavirus in all their dimensions will be an overarching priority for my presidency. At the same time, we must not forget our existing challenges. Firstly, the 75th year of the United Nations should be a time to revitalize the spirit of cooperation that laid the foundation of this organization. In recent years, the trust deficit between nations has impeded the work of the United Nations. Member states fail to compromise, and when there is compromise, it is based on the lowest common denominator. At times, this has been the case for the General Assembly, and it has been the case for the Security Council. As President of the General Assembly, the most representative and most democratic organ of the United Nations, I will endeavor to build trust between member states. I will do my best to build consensus around the important and timely issues on our agenda, from arms control to human rights, to climate and sustainable development. Second, during the 75th session, the General Assembly should reflect on its own work and embrace reforms in order to be effective and relevant. We need to enhance coherence by addressing gaps, overlaps, and duplication where they exist. The pandemic-related restrictions could be an opportunity to streamline our agenda without compromising on substance. I'm aware that this is a delicate task, but I will put my best efforts towards an outcome that realizes success from this dreadful pandemic, that sees this House come out stronger and more united with results to show for efforts. Third, in order to improve the delivery of our mandate, we need to hear from the people we serve. I see this hall as the Parliament of Humanity, and I intend to use this platform to amplify the voices of the most vulnerable people in the world. Here in the chief deliberative, policy-making and representative organ, we must consider the concerns of all people in need or under oppression. I will work with member states to ensure they have a voice, and I also intend to use these good offices to highlight the importance of impartial and unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid and full respect for international humanitarian law in conflicts and crises. Fourth, as we enter the decade of action to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, it is clear that we are not on track. Throughout the term, I will promote the use of emerging technologies, strengthened data, and results-oriented action to ensure that no one is left behind. Finally, in this seminal year for women's empowerment, I will also champion gender equality across the agenda of the 75th session, which evidence shows supports greater levels of peace and prosperity. Mr. Secretary General, with these thoughts in mind, I look forward to reinforcing our partnership, which I believe is essential to the effective stewardship of this organization. I will ensure my efforts complement yours, including through supporting implementation of the UN reform agenda to make the UN more responsive and effective. I will also work with the presidents of the Security Council and ECOSOC to coordinate our activities for maximum effect. Efficiency, effectiveness, accountability, and non-discrimination will be the guiding principles of my presidency. I will represent the membership as a whole, I will listen to the views of all member states equally. I believe that we need to lead by example and inspire the world, and I will work towards this end. The General Assembly cannot stand idle while human beings suffer. This is against the principle of collective responsibility that underpins the UN Charter. Excellencies, as the 74th session draws to a close, I here want to thank His Excellency Mr. Tijani Mohammed Bande for his considered and steady leadership as President of the 74th session of the General Assembly. Excellency, you once described yourself as a perpetual student. Your efforts to navigate the General Assembly in these difficult times proved that you are also a fast learner. Since the start of the pandemic, the Office of the President of the General Assembly, under your direction, has guided the work of the General Assembly transparently and effectively. You have shown a strong leadership. I look forward to continuing to champion the priorities of your term, including poverty eradication and inclusive and equitable education for all. These sustainable development goals are crucial to the future prosperity and peace of our planet. On behalf of all member states, I would like to thank you and your team once again and look forward to continuing to work with you as the Nigerian permanent representative. Can I please ask a big round of applause to President Mohammed Bande. Thank you. And I shall now take the oath of this hallowed office. I solemnly declare, I solemnly declare that I shall truthfully perform my duties and exercise the functions entrusted to me as President of the General Assembly of the United Nations in all loyalty, discretion, and conscience, and that I shall discharge these functions and regulate my conduct with the interest of the United Nations only in view and in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and the Code of Ethics for the President of the General Assembly, without seeking or accepting any instruction in regard to the performance of my duties from any government or other source external to the organization.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır, President-elect of this 75th session, for his statement and for the taking of oath. I would now like to invite the President-elect of the 75th session to meet me at the side of the restroom for the handing over of the gavel. The 75th session will open immediately after the adjournment. I declare closed the 74th session of the General Assembly. The meeting is adjourned.
It is my great pleasure and honor to declare open the 75th regular session of the General Assembly and call to order its first plenary meeting. In accordance with Rule 62 of the Rules of Procedure, I invite representatives to stand and observe 1 minute of silence, prayer, or meditation. distinguished delegates, I'm deeply honored to address you all for the first time as President of the United Nations General Assembly. As a national of a founding member state, it is a privilege to hold this office for the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. And I want to thank you for entrusting me with this duty. Ladies and gentlemen, next week, more heads of state will address the general debate than ever before. The crucial high-level meetings over the 2 weeks will guide our work for the session. I'm confident that their impact will not be compromised by the circumstances. The context in which we are working serves to remind us on the necessity of the multilateral system and inspires us all to make use of the UN Charter to address our collective challenges. I will do my utmost to support and lead, with your fruitful participation, the high-level meetings to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the 25th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women, a high-level plenary meeting to commemorate and promote the International Day for the total elimination of nuclear weapons, and the Biodiversity Summit, in addition to the general debate. During the 75th session, we will hold 2 General Assembly special sessions, one on COVID-19, the first special session convened to discuss a pandemic, and the second against corruption. I will also work with you successfully implement the various mandates entrusted to me, including but not limited to review of the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy, commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the World Summit for Social Development, preparations for the 5th United Nations Conference on Least Developed Countries, high-level meeting regarding water-related goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda, Oceans Conference to support the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 14, as well as the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly and Security Council reform. As long as health conditions allow, I intend to continue physical meetings of the General Assembly, taking the necessary mitigation measures to protect the health and safety of delegates and UN staff. In our business of diplomacy, there is no substitute to meeting counterparts face-to-face to build long-term understanding of each other's positions and forge compromise. Thank you. And now let's go to work. I now invite the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Gutteres, to make a statement. Your Excellency.
Excellencies, it is a pleasure to be with you again for the Nations General Assembly. Let me begin by warmly congratulating His Excellency Ambassador